In episode 8, Audrey is driving Alex nuts. She tries to kind of vent to Wilfred, but he isn't having it. She then brings up how she knows that Wilfred must be scheming something, but he tells her that if he's up to something, she doesn't have to know. She then brings up how there was an intentional breach of Big Alice in the morning, but Wilfred acts like he doesn't know about it, playing dumb the entire time. Now, after this conversation with Alex, Wilfred heads down into the infirmary to meet with Josie. And Josie is doing much better. Wilfred even shows her reflection in the mirror to show her the improvement that she's had thanks to the Headwoods goo. And he's been told by the Headwoods that she's been dealing with phantom pain, so he has a trick for that he shows her, all the while being extremely nice to Josie. He leaves her by telling her that he's no longer going to lock the door and welcomes her to Big Alice. So she heads out to grab some lunch, and down walks Audrey. She introduces herself to Josie because the two have never met, and Josie asks if Layton is still in charge of Snowpiercer, to which Audrey says, yeah, barely. Josie then realizes that Audrey must have defected, but Audrey says, no, I've returned. We've had very different journeys, but we both were leaders on Snowpiercer. We spent years being responsible for others, but now that we're here with all that weight, I've never slept better. Right before she leaves, she tells Josie, the future is yours if you want it, you just have to look in the mirror. She then heads up to the top of Big Alice, where she's looking for Wilfred, but all she finds is Alex, and it doesn't seem like their relationship has gotten any better. She asks Alex, where is he? Because he told me I should be here to see it. And when Alex asks, see what? Audrey tells Alex to turn around, and that's when she sees Icy Bob outside on the top of Snowpiercer coming back in. So Alex rushes downstairs just in enough time to see Bob return from the outside, and Bob is not doing well. And as the Headwoods tend to him, and Wilfred is overseeing it, Alex is questioning, why did you send him out there? Now, once Bob is admitted to the infirmary, Josie goes to check on him, and he's in rough shape, and he tells her that he's just getting ready for his purpose. But one of the Headwoods comes over and lets her know about the advancements they've made, and Josie gets curious and she checks it out, and she is blown away about the fact that thanks to that goo, she's not feeling the same effect she normally would have when she sticks her hand outside. But over on Snowpiercer, they were busy having a funeral service for all of the breachmen who had died. And it's a little concerning for Layton because during the funeral service, a couple of the brakemen throw up the W sign. He doesn't have much time to dwell on it though because he wants to meet with Bach along with Till and Roach. And they tell Bach the truth, that it was Pastor Logan acting as Wilfred who murdered all of the breachmen. But even with all of the evidence in front of him, Bach doesn't accept it. He thinks that it's a tailie sticking up for the tailies. But even after Layton pleads with him to open his eyes, Bach doesn't accept the fact that Wilfred would have his breachmen killed. So Layton then holds a meeting with Zara, Roach, Dr. Pelton, Lights, and Till. This entire group is like the United Nations of Snowpiercer. And Layton isn't oblivious to all of the Red Lanterns. He can feel the tide shifting on Snowpiercer. Lights brings up the fact that the tail can't even move freely anymore. They're back at the tail. And Till brings up the fact that half the train is brainwashed. The tunnelmen are openly calling for Wilfred's return. The good news is Pelton lets him know that most of second class still back Layton. But as everybody's hemming and hawing, Roach says, don't worry guys, you have the brakemen. You can relax. And that isn't real comforting to Layton because he saw some of the brakemen throw up the W sign, but Roach reminds him that that's a tradition for the breachmen. It's done as a sign of respect. He promises Layton that the brakemen will hold their posts and they will follow Roach. But after this meeting, Roach has some family business to attend to. He's sending his daughter up train for safety, and she doesn't want to go, but with what's going on in the train, and having already lost 2 children of his own, he feels like it's the smartest decision for his family. So after him and his wife say goodbye to their daughter, he fills his wife in on what's going on, about how divided the train is and how Layton is trying to keep the peace, but the fact is they're one dirty look away from a civil war. And his wife brings up the fact that people are having a hard time believing that Logan was the one who had the breachmen killed. It seems like even Roach's wife doesn't really believe it. Roach then goes to get a drink of water, but they're having plumbing issues. This little tiny leak ends up becoming a massive leak. It even starts setting off signals in the engine room, which Javi and Ben see, so Javi heads downstairs to investigate what it could be. As for the leak, well, Ruth has gone to check up on it, but Osweiler and LJ are already way ahead of her. They feel like this is their big opportunity to make sure that they don't lose their job in sanitation. If they do a good job, they clean up the leak, they'll keep their post. And they assure Ruth that they're going to clean up the job as fast as they possibly can. But that cleanup's going to take a little bit longer. Because as Javi is trying to figure out what's wrong, Ben lets him know that there's a pressure surge. And boy, is there ever, because a couple of pipes burst, and water just floods into Snowpiercer. So with this emergency going on, Ben calls Till, Roach, and Layton to fill him in on what's going on. There's a lot of technical mumbo-jumbo going on, but basically, one of the vents is just clogged with snow. And instead of converting water into hydrogen, the block is just causing the water to flood into Snowpiercer. Now, normally a jam like this wouldn't be that serious, but with only one breachman, it's pretty damn serious. Especially when you consider that breachman doesn't seem like he really wants to help out Layton too badly. But Layton doesn't really have a choice. He's going to have to ask Bach to risk his life. So Layton and Till head downstairs and tell Bach that the train needs him, and he says, well, what if I say no? Layton tells Bach, look, man, I'm not down here giving you an order. It's your call if you want to do this. And after thinking a little bit, Bach decides, all right, time to go outside. So as the tunnel men are trying to get a handle on the blockage, and Bach getting ready to go outside, Layton heads to the engine where they let him know that they're going to have to slow the train down, but this means it's going to be a 2-hour late meeting with Mel for the rendezvous, the same Melanie that they haven't heard from. All the clearing of the snow, though, has gotten the attention of Alex from Big Alice. At first, she thinks that Bob might have been outside to disconnect the train. She's trying to figure it out because she realizes Snowpiercer's slowed down. So Wilfred says, well, why don't you just ask him? And she does that. She hops on the intercom, but Ben just tells her it's routine maintenance. The good news is Bach is ready to go outside, and he does that. He climbs down a ladder, and he's located the problem with the vent. It's a railroad spike that has been stabbed in there. And Bach is able to grab it. But he also knows that the railroad spike was no accident. First of all of the ice was broken off of the ladder, so somebody was there before him. And this is the moment where Bach realizes that Wilfred did in fact have the breachman killed. Because he's the only one who would have had somebody else go outside and sabotage the train. So he gives Layton his Wilfred pin and tells him, maybe you can shove it up his ass one day, pledging his loyalty to Layton. There is a problem though. Ben tells Layton to follow him, and they head down to basically the engine's brain. They've been getting weird readings coming back, and they realize that there's a sensor that is in the intake that must have been damaged when the railroad spike went in there. And when they investigate it, sure enough, it is completely fried. Now, it's not that hard to replace. The problem is they don't have another one, and this thing is vital to the train. If they don't have one, they're screwed. And Layton has a pretty good idea of who has one, and of course, it's Wilfred. And at this point, over at Big Alice, Alex has figured out why they were trying to vent and what Icy Bob was out there doing. What she can't figure out is what's next. And Audrey jokes with her, well, I think what comes next is a phone call. And sure enough, at that moment, Ben calls telling her that it's an emergency and they need help. Now, while Layton and Ben and Javi were trying to fix the train, there's a lot of oblivious passengers in Snowpiercer. And that includes Ruth, who was just getting an update from LJ about the cleanup, and she's actually been really impressed with LJ's work. It leads to LJ and Osweiler hooking up that night. But Till and Roach are also oblivious, and they're meeting with the brakemen to go over a strategy to, keep everybody safe. But some of the brakemen are concerned about their orders. Mainly, this rumor that's going around that the jackboots who survived the revolution have rebuilt a command. It's a rumor that neither Till nor Roach had heard of. But this conversation gets interrupted when Roach's wife walks in with sandwiches to give to everybody. And after everybody leaves, she has a conversation with Roach about the ongoings of the train because she's also kept her ears to the ground. And what she's been able to discern is that at this point, there's a lot more Wilfred supporters than there are Layton supporters. And it's also obvious that she's become one of those people. She thinks that they were just better off under Wilfred's system. They spent 7 years and everybody was fine. But Roach does not agree. He reminds her that Wilfred built a train with holes in it to freeze off arms. Layton, on the other hand, is a good guy who's trying to build a society that they can be proud of. Now, Roach is called to a meeting with Zara, Till, Ruth, Lights, Ben, where Layton fills them in on the fact that they've discovered that it was Wilfred who was the one who sabotaged the train. And unfortunately for them, Wilfred is now their only way out. They know it, and more importantly, he knows it. The good news is Wilfred has a replacement, but he's going to have to come with it, and they only have 2 hours to fix this thing or else the engine collapses. Roach brings up the fact that this isn't going to be good for Wilfred's supporters once they find out that he's actually in the engine saving the day. But Layton's already thought of that. He says no one's going to find out. We're going to sneak him in. He's going to fix it. We're going to sneak him out. Zara is concerned about what Wilfred's planning. She doesn't like the fact that Layton is letting him in the engine, but they don't have a choice. He reassures them that he's going to have eyes on Wilfred the entire time, and if it all goes to hell, he'll send up a flare to alert them. So they go to the tail to meet Wilfred, and he's a little surprised that no one is there to greet him except Layton, Ruth, and Roach. But they put him in one of those carts in the tunnels, and as they're heading to the front of the train, one of the tunnel men ends up seeing Wilfred go by. So word is out on the train that Wilfred is there. And the tunnel men are scheming to keep Wilfred there. Wilfred, though, arrives at the front of the train, and he's getting a little emotional about being back there. He heads downstairs into the engine, where he meets with Ben, who he's not fond of, and Javi. He hands over the device, and Ben and Javi start going to work, with Layton making sure that he doesn't get anywhere near it. As they go to turn it on, Something, though, goes wrong. Even Wilfred seems kind of concerned. He starts screaming, "What the hell have you done on my engine?" And that's when Ben remembers that Melanie had retrofitted everything during the 5th revolution. The engine is down to 14%. They don't have the reserves to restart them. They are in between a rock and a hard place. But Wilfred thinks for a little bit and then says, Big Alice can push us. We'll manually disengage the motors, and then that'll allow her to push with less resistance. We'll do an emergency shutdown of the engine. We then rewire the circuitry and we jumpstart her back up. The issue is that's over 200 manual shutdowns, and they're not even certain that it'll start back up. They've never done a shutdown this large before. They're basically shutting down all of Snowpiercer at once. But they don't have a lot of options. They're running out of time. So that's what they're going to do. Ben puts out an emergency alert letting everybody know that it's a code 5 and gets everybody in a position to restart the engines. And while Ben is doing that, Wilfred is getting in contact with Big Alice, letting Alex know that she's going to have to push. Ben then gives the order for everybody to turn off Snowpiercer. But with little time to get this thing fixed, Wilfred kind of takes control, chastising Javi for not being quick enough, chastising Layton for not being an engineer, and then walking over to the intercom, grabbing it, and addressing all of Snowpiercer. It's Layton's worst nightmare because this confirms that the cat is out of the bag, Wilfred is in the engine. And as over half of Snowpiercer rejoices at just hearing his voice, he lets them know that on his mark, they're to restart the engine manually. So they do that, and it works. And as Wilfred is restarting his engine, he's doing so the whole time smiling directly at Layton because he knows that he's got him. And when Snowpiercer turns back on, most of the residences are chanting Wilfred's name. And Layton knows that it's over, that Wilfred's got command of the train, so he just heads to the engine room and lights off a flare. And the Layton supporters are crying because they too know what it means, that Layton's time in charge of Snowpiercer has come to an end. Layton actually gets arrested, and Roach comes to him and tells him that he's heading to Big Alice, and he's been told that Layton will be treated fairly, although Layton doesn't really believe that. Roach reassures him that he will do what he can to make sure that the tailies are protected during this whole thing. The biggest regret that Layton has is the fact that he just wants to see his child grow up. And he's not sure that's going to happen now that he's being arrested and taken over to Big Alice. But before he does go, he is able to say goodbye to Zara. She's still working hospitality, and she instructs him not to give up. He then is escorted over to Big Alice by security, and the security lets Roach know that he is to report to Big Alice straight to Wilfred. But when Roach arrives over at Big Alice, it's not Wilfred who greets him, it's Audrey. And she escorts him into a room where the Headwoods are waiting for him to put him in the drawers, because as he sees, his family is already hooked up. And the reason that Wilfred wasn't there to greet Roach is because he is at the front of the engine, where Ben reluctantly has to tell him, "Mr. Wilfred, you have the train," as Wilfred sits down in his chair, retaking the train that he created. Thanks for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you don't. Be nice in the comments section. Nasty comments hurt my feelings. I work hard on these. If I make a mistake, it happens. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, it'll be up soon. Sharing is caring. Put it on your MySpace page or your away message. And check out my podcast, Scene Invaders, wherever you listen to podcasts.